Hey everybody, Seth Campbell here with the new Segue Says podcast. Well, this week we're going to focus on two songs from the mid to late 80s, both of which are very rock and roll, and both of which, once again, the keys are transposed, though this time, not by me. I'll explain later. The first song is actually more like two songs. It's called Domino by Genesis. It's from their Invisible Touch album, probably their best-selling record. And the second is I'm Gonna Be / 500 Miles by the Proclaimers, which everybody knows. Now, Domino is originally centered, I guess, around D, but in the more recent tours they brought it down to be centered around C for Phil Collins' vocal range, and that's also much better for my vocal range. And 500 Miles is originally in E, but the version I first heard, the first version I ever heard, was Celtic Thunder's cover of it, sung by the late, great George Donaldson, which they also brought it down to C, which again happens to be better for my vocal range. So, you could meet these in the middle, do them both in D, or do them in C, or whatever, however you want to do it. But for all intents and purposes, we're going to use the same key of the versions I'm talking about, and you can find the Celtic Thunder version on Take Me Home, the Take Me Home album, and which, funnily enough, is the name of a different hit song by Phil Collins, but that's another story. And the Genesis version in this key is, I think, the best version of it they've ever done, and it's on Live Over Europe 2007. Now, to dissect the songs a little bit, Domino, as I said, is actually essentially two songs. The first part is Domino Part 1, In the Glow of the Night, and Domino Part 2, The Last Domino. And it was pretty much the only track on the Invisible Touch album that wasn't a hit single, and that's probably something to do with the fact that it's pushing 11 minutes long, if I'm not mistaken. So, obviously, if we're going to do one into the other song, we're only going to concern ourselves with Part 2. Now, Part 1, it's really cool. It's got a lot of bits that are centered in G minor. Can't you see what you are doing to me? Can't you see what you have done? And it's much more. It has more highs and lows than Part 2. The main part, when it gets to the C section, the chorus is in the glow of the night. Do you know what you have done? Do you know what you've begun? Can't you see we shall be together again? And so that's the more emotional part, because the song itself, the idea of the domino principle, the domino effect, where you do one thing and it causes something else to happen, which causes something further to happen, it's used in a very subtle political metaphor. Tony Banks, the keyboardist, wrote the lyrics for this one. And the first part is on a personal level, and his idea was that it would be something in the life of some powerful politician or whatever, some personal decision, some rash action, emotional response to something, sets off this massive reaction. In Part 2, aka the last domino, is when it reaches, social ramifications, public ramifications, where everybody's life is affected by this one rash decision that someone who happened to be in power might have made. And so, as you'd expect, that section is much more intense and much angrier, and it goes through a few different phases, all of which are at more of this driving beat. There's a lot of weird chords. Blood on the windows, millions of ordinary people out there, they gaze at the scenery, they act as though it is perfectly clear. Take a look at the mountains, take a look at that beautiful river of blood. And as you can see, so it's very dark and dramatic, but eventually toward the end, a lot of the complex rock stuff, the bizarre prog rock chords. You know, you got your F sharp major over C, which is a tritone dissonance, as well as a half step dissonance. So that's about as crazy as it gets. But by the end of this song, it's essentially doing a loop, all of pedal progression, which means the bass note stays the same, all over C, with B flat, F, C, which is, you know, it's a flat 7, 4, 1, and there's sort of a vocal jam piece to it. And there's there's nothing you can do if you're the next in line, and we're all the next in line. When you gotta go, Domino. Do you know what you have done? Do you know what you've begun? And it just essentially loops this. By the time it gets to the end, it starts doing this rhythmic thing. And it throws in one more weird chord to end it. This is how they end it. So big, dramatic finish. And in more recent tours, I can't find this on YouTube, but if you can find the DVD of the 2007 performance, if you get this huge screen behind them, and as the last hit, there's on the screens there's this big domino effect of a huge pattern falling down, and as the last as the last hit, this big final domino comes crashing down. It's the coolest thing you've ever seen. Anyway, so to really appreciate how insane that song is, you have to hear the whole thing. If you've got 11 minutes. And I do recommend the Live Over Europe 2007 version. I think that one's the best. Now, on to 500 Miles by the Scottish singing brothers, the Reed brothers, call themselves the Proclaimers. Now, of course, it's actually the technical title is I'm Gonna Be, and then in parentheses 500 Miles, but everybody knows it as 500 Miles. And it's a really, really catchy song. It's a lot of fun to do. You know, if you got a crowd that's in the mood for a sing-along, because there's this bit in the chorus, which I'll show you briefly, as a matter of fact. I'm just going to do a verse-chorus like I usually do. I couldn't do that with Domino, but I can do it with this song. When I wake up, well, you know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. And when I go out, well, you know I'm gonna be the man that goes along with you. When I get drunk, well, you know I'm gonna be the man that gets drunk next to you. And if I haver, well, you know I'm gonna be the man who's havering to you. And I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more, just to be the man who walks 1,000 miles and falls down at your door. And then it actually goes to the second verse, but in the remaining choruses, it would go to the sing-along. Da da da, da da da, da 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 da. And obviously it'd be call and response, so I go da da da. The audience would go da da da. So it's a really uplifting number, which kind of makes it strange to play out a Domino when you think of the content, but the grooves work nicely together, and that's how I came up with this one. So again, all of this basically is over a C in the bass. 500 Miles is very pentatonic, only the most basic chords you need for a standard pop song. But as you can hear, you got this beat. And if you remember the Domino beat, essentially the backbeat is still in the same place, but there's a lot more shorter notes in between, so you're playing eighth notes or 16. Those. Still got this, essentially this one note droning in the bass. So that's what we're going to use. And because the tempo of these songs is very similar, okay, maybe Domino's a little bit faster in the recorded versions, but, you know, you can adapt it live. You can play 500 Miles a little faster, Domino a little slower, whatever you want to do. But because the tempos are so very, very similar, we're just going to go right from one to the other. No stopping, no ambiguousness, none of the complex stuff I've been trying to feed you for the several podcasts now. This is just going to be, you start one right as the other ends. So Domino, of course, ends like this. So you got that, and 500 Miles begins with just... So I don't think I really need to say much else, do I? I mean, basically, when you make the last hit of Domino, you simultaneously make that the first hit of 500 Miles. So this is how that would sound. We're all the next in line, yeah, yeah. Gotta go, gotta go. When I wake up, well, you know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. And when I go out, well, you know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. And there you go. Purely based in the key and the groove. It's all right in this same pocket. You don't have to do anything extraordinary. You just have to start one on the same note you stop the previous. So for all the complexity of at least one of the songs involved, and being picky and choosy about how we're using it and everything, once you get to the actual segue, it's very simple. So hopefully you've enjoyed this, and hopefully you will tune in next week for the 50th episode special. I have got quite a surprise planned for everybody, so I will hope to see you then. Have a great week. Thanks for watching.